Again, the population of Command Area 1 is about 49,800, 111 police staffing and 60 fire staffing. Not too much population in Command Area 2, 10,000. We have police staffing about 10, fire staffing 14. And Command Area 3, a population of about 200. Police staffing is not there right now. The sheriff is going to be working that until they move into that area at 2010. Fire staffing is about 14. We went through a benchmarking analysis against about 10 comparable cities. We show maps up on the display for two that we think are probably most comparable in the Valley, Scottsdale and Peoria. They're significantly larger, but they represent the build-out, at least through our 2030 milestone, fairly comparable for the city of Goodyear. I think we can learn a lot from their growth pattern, while the Sonoran Valley is a leapfrog development, and these are more starting from the central location and moving north, and less density. I think there's a lot of comparability between the two studies and the very linear nature of the cities. The development triggers we looked at were new residential communities, increased population or density areas, and the response time and distance. That's something that response time and distance probably is more of a critical factor to fire than police, but still a factor. And the staffing and control from the facilities. These are all facilities-related triggers. Police stations, there's not a lot of data out there to try to compartmentalize a station into, I guess, triggers and thresholds. But through our experience and working with the staff, we try to come up with some reasonable trigger and thresholds to work with. A police station, we're looking at a maximum population of 160,000, maximum service area of 75 square miles. That service area will not be by itself, but with substations as well to help cover that area. Maximum linear distance of 5 miles. That is the same for a police station and substation, with the factor that we tried not to get a patrol car traveling more than 5 miles in any direction for a service area. And then again, a police substation, we're looking at a maximum population of 40,000. Now, the population numbers we're using really impact the facilities on how much staff will be in a facility, how large we anticipate that facility to get before you go to a new facility. Fire station triggers will be addressed by Cameron.
Hi, good evening. The fire station triggers are really a compilation of the list that you see in front of you. We have distance to the closest station, the amount of developable land is out there, how much development is actually on the land, square footages of buildings, the call volume in the area. That refers to how many times there are calls to the fire department, how many times they're responding. What we measure is the saturation of response in a certain area. So what we do is we take all of these factors. The second to the last one, percentage of calls in excess of 4 minutes travel time. That's important to note because the fire chief, we've designated a goal to respond to all calls within 4 minutes 90% of the time. So it's a compilation of these items here that actually cause us to consider putting another fire station and manning another station in a certain region.
Thanks, Cameron.
Now, this is just some additional detail. You can see the first bullet is less than 25% structures 3 miles or more from a station. We monitor the situation. We monitor the data on the response statistics that are generated from fire response. The next bullet is more than 35% structures 3 or 4 miles from the station. We look at the option of putting a temporary station in that particular area. Then a greater than 50% of structures 5 miles or more from a station, and 30% of those response times is over that 8-minute mark. That's when we start talking about having to put other services in to render service to that particular area.
So some of the triggers we used were residential communities, and we know that to start out down there, they need service from day one. As soon as you start getting houses built down there, or once you are down there, we looked at having order of magnitude 2,500 dwellings, a reasonable size that for a new facility is developed. The construction of the roadway obviously is a trigger for development, and then adequate radio system coverage as well. Throughout the course of this project, we kept in mind some of the criteria we developed at the beginning, and that was that we want an equivalent level of service for all residents, whether it's in the existing residential areas or new. We want to maintain the stated goals. Priority 1 for police within 7 minutes. Patrol officer having 30% of proactive time available. And the fire department response, in 4 minutes, 90% of the time. This is a comparison of our staffing between police and fire. Again, at the far left, Goodyear population about 60,000. Again, going down the list to about 300,000. And their approximate year, 2008 to 2030. And the total police staff, what you can see is from the police staff, the staffing per 1,000 now, currently, this is total police staff, is just over 2 per 1,000 population, and by the end of the study is over 2.9 per 1,000. Cameron?
And on the fire side, you see today's numbers at the 60,000 population growing to about just under 700 staff. And that 2.30 fire staff per 1,000 is consistent with the 10 cities that we've been able to compare to from the area.
Yeah, I could add the police staffing is comparable to both the Peoria and the Scottsdale numbers, a little bit higher.
Let me ask you a question, going back to that chart.
You bet.
Why in the population areas of 237,000 to 299,000 does the police staff per 1,000 population drop from 3.20 to 2.88 and 2.93? What's the reasoning for that?
The population grows at a kind of more of a consistent rate than the staffing does. Staffing a lot of times will ratchet into place, especially if you have a new facility that comes online. We have a lot of detail that shows you how we developed that and how each different facility comes online. If you'd like to take a look more detail, you're welcome to.
And if I could tail onto that, one of the things to imagine is when we put a new public safety service facility, be it police or fire, into a growing area, the staffing ratio might be high given that particular population at the point that trigger calls for that new service. But then as the population fills in, the population then starts to bleed down that number of 2.9 or whatever it is, down to a more nominal level. I don't know if that's helpful.
But it seems to me with more population, you have more exposure to crime. And consequently, it seems to me because of the exposure to crime, you'd need more patrols and more man hours for police staff.
To a point, yeah, you're getting into some of the larger cities, and you have a little more issues. But there is a scale to the department that you can actually get some more efficiency. All of the police department talked to that as well.
I'm not going to be concerned with that naturally, when that population reaches that point. But I'm just interested in why there's such, to me, a discrepancy. Go ahead, Chief.
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Sousa. When we're projecting out that far, it's really difficult to really define that specifically. So what we're doing is we're looking at benchmarks from other cities, and we're doing trending with calls now and where they are in relationship to populations. So this is, quite honestly, this is our best guess as we know it today. Is it accurate? Reasonably accurate, but to say why it's that way, we're basically going off of the information that we have as far as how we've trended it, looking at our population and ratios, and looking at what the benchmark cities have given to us.
Okay.
Question. Wait. Okay, so they're showing that in the year 2010, the benchmark would be 220 officers. That's 100. That's 101 more in 2 years' time. It's
Total staffing for the department.
total
yeah.
staffing, not
Correct.
just police officers.
Not just police officers, yeah.
Okay. Are
But
you
it's-
hoping
it's
that
still
we'll be
100,
there?
you're right.
Or is this a goal that we can reach? Is this obtainable, or is this going to be?
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Osborne, in looking at that, again, a lot of these things were done based on planning efforts that we've done thus far and looking at projected, if we were going to continue to grow at the rates we were, obviously that's slowed down a little bit. So we still don't know what that's going to bring for us. But can we realistically add 100 police officers by 2010? Probably not.
Okay.
Okay.
Same way with fire.
If I may, Mayor and Council, Ken Cooper is here representing the developer, and he sent me a little email just this day with the same observation. And the whole idea is at the beginning of the project, we had to make some assumptions about growth rates. And now at this point, we're just sticking with those, and throughout the benefit of the document planning process will still be in place. As population rates increase or decrease, so will the implementation of the plan.
And from our experience with working with other public safety agencies planning their facilities, we have noticed that you set the bar of where you want to be, just as Peoria and Scottsdale have. And it may take you longer than you want to get there, but that you have that goal out there that as fast as you reasonably can get to that is their goal. Projected police and fire staffing by command area. We've broken it down in the command area 1 at the north. Again, the command area 2 is the blue in the middle, and then the Sonora Valley at the bottom. The primary difference you'll see, I think, with the staffing between police and fire is that there's more centralized staffing functions from the police side, so you'll have a higher number of support staff or people in command area 1 than you will see in command area 2 and 3.
These are examples of some of the mapping that we've done with some of our GIS people, and along with GIS people from the city of Goodyear, which have been very helpful to us. And we're able to plot through polygon design 4, 5, 6, and 8-minute response times to start building the kind of staffing that we need in a particular given area. And these two shots, these two maps are from the Sonoran Valley, and you can see the distance and travel time goals of 1.5 to 2.5 miles. They're highlighted in the different colors. When you have the hard copy, you'd probably have a better idea to look at it in more detail.
For the police side of it, we went through some locational analysis, and part of that started with the distance from a facility of 5 miles, from border to border, to find maybe the most efficient locations to put a facility. It eventually moved into the diagram you're looking at, which didn't conform exactly to the most efficient location, but you can see by the 5-mile circles that you can fairly effectively cover the service areas with little overlap. There's a little overlap. The one you'll find in the Sonoran Valley area in the bottom, we show 2 circles where you have an immediate need for a police and fire facility. So the police facility is shown initially, and then quickly moved to that permanent location. So that's why you see the 2 locations. At this point, we can talk a little more about some of the roles. We have different facility types. The central police facility is the headquarters, administrative. It has the support services, records, 911 communications, investigations, and along with fire prevention functions. Closely related to that is a central support facility. All, again, will be in Command Area 1. That facility will have forensics, will have property evidence, impound. These are the again, closer related with the centralized headquarters functions, but less public, more operational. Then we have the decentralized functions, and for the police, that is the command area stations, of which there are one per each command area, with the potential, maybe beyond the time frame of our study of 2030, for a second command station in command area 2, just because of the size. That's totally dependent on how that area grows out. Then subordinate to a station is a substation, and you can see those on the master plan as well. By the way, there are some decentralized functions that are somewhat redundant because of the distance to the Sonoran Valley. We have to have some communications capabilities, some redundancy for an EOC, because, and this is something that's familiar to other agencies who cover long distances or large areas, where you have a little bit more of a standalone capability. If something happens, communications is lost, that they can stand almost as their own police station for a while, separate from the rest of the department if they have to.
What is the difference between the staffing of a substation and a central station?
It's actually who commands it, where you have a commander over a station, and a lieutenant would be over a substation, where you would have a smaller span of control and more operational from a substation. There are more other public amenities, records function at a station. That is, majority of the contact will be probably driven from the community to the station rather than the substation. But the substation will still offer, but it's, some public venues, it's just more of an operational facility that's subordinate to the commander at the station.
Yeah, because I'd like to have that more defined one of these days. It's not tonight, but something to think about, because I'm often concerned about, do we want the police in a station behind a desk somewhere, or do we want them out on the street?
Yeah, I
And
totally agree.
This is, I don't know, why we're staffing substations. I can understand the main stations, why we need those, but I've never been able to understand fully the substation idea. Maybe I can get that from the...
And the substations are usually something that is not open. If you do have public hours, it is not open to the extent that a station is, so you have more limited access. And that, again, is something that if there's more needed for public service, they're going to be driven towards going to that station rather than substation. And our mapping, we took to another level where we started plotting in facilities, and those are existing facilities, transitioning, especially in Command Area 1. And they identify the facilities we spoke about for the headquarters, centralized functions, support functions, and the stations. Command Area 2 as well. And in the Sonoran Valley, with designations showing the land use and do you have anything on the far side? This is something that it'll be easier to understand. Maybe going through, we just want to show you that we have the end picture in mind of where these facilities go for your view. And the next step, once we get your comments, your feedback, is how we get to that level, which can address a little bit of the growth you're talking about for staffing, how we get to the facilities implementation. So at this point, I guess we can discuss what the next presentation is and get your any more questions you might have. The draft document we're looking to have submitted to you for review May 5th. The City Council work session we're looking at is on June 9th, with a follow-up council presentation June 23rd. So if there's any more questions, I can take those now.
Mayor, members of the council, we recognize that the final report is going to be somewhat technical, and it's going to have a lot of data. And I kind of watched 2 work sessions now where we've thrown a whole lot of information at you, and recognize that. Appreciate your tolerating that for another session or so. But what we'd like to do is get the draft document in front of you all. Police and fire staffs will be available to meet with you, to kind of really work through and go over these documents and really try to make sure that you get a sense of what you're looking at and develop any questions. So by the time we get to the work session in June, you'll be very comfortable with the document, and you'll be able to move more quickly than had we not taken the time to give you a little opportunity to sit down with us. So that'll be the approach we'll provide for you all. We'll give you the document, and we'll work with you to kind of make sure that it's all making sense, and try to, if we can, address any concerns you may have that we may be able to address even prior to the work session. So that is our plan on how to move through all this information.
You are going to give us a portfolio of what we've gone through this today, right?
You're going to receive a much more comprehensive document, the final document, I should say a draft of the final document. These exhibits and this data and all the planning assumptions will be included in that. And they'll be a little more readable than
Yes,
sometimes a
thank you.
PowerPoint tends to make them. So we'll provide that for you.
Chief, can you tell me what the actual mileage is between our northern and our southern end of the city now?
Oh, we just sat down and figured that out the other day, and
Who has the figure?
37 or so right now, which is really, it paints part of the challenge for providing services. We'd all like them to be these pretty nice shapes that we could just locate resources by, and I compare it a lot in our conversations. We are almost, if you will, some of the coastal communities on the east and west coast. We're long and linear, and that definitely presents some very specific service challenges when you're trying to do long-term master planning. Very similar kind of challenges for us.
Thank you.
I gotta get to Mexico.
Is that it?
That's it, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, great. Thank you very much. We'll now move to the Goodyear Action Team for updated information on noise complaints enforcement.
Mayor Kavanaugh, members of the council, what I would like to do is on behalf of the Goodyear Action Team, as well as then the police department, kind of talk about the noise complaints that we do receive in the city. Looking at an ordinance, there were several proposals of things that we wanted to get out there, and for the past year, probably more than that, the Goodyear Action Team, which is a multi-departmental team, makes up this group, and what we do is we look at long-term problem solving for issues in the city. And looking at the issue of noise complaints, we had to first define what we really meant by noise complaints, and there really are quite a few things that can create noise complaints. And in looking at what we had, we also had to take stock of what do we have that we can use from an enforcement mechanism. So we looked at state statute, we looked at city codes, who is responsible for the enforcement of those particular codes, and what is the actual work volume compared to everything else that we do to really justify doing an ordinance that may or may not be necessary right now because of how it fits in with the rest of our workloads. One of the other things that was very apparent was that there's an interface of commercial and residential noise complaints, where we have areas where there's residential development, and then there's the big lots there. Then all of a sudden a commercial business is there, and it does generate noise complaints that at one time did not exist. So we have to really understand that, those things of proximity to residential, times of day, and we've been very good at looking at some creative ways in addressing that outside of a formal ordinance. And then we want to talk about just some of the next steps that we're going to be doing. So the first thing we have is we have state statute. Arizona Revised Statutes, the Criminal Code Title 13, 2904, basically states that a person commits disorderly conduct by making unreasonable noise. Now this has worked very well for the police department. This is a code that's pretty regularly enforced. We have had some very good success with this in our courts in getting convictions, and we basically need to show what is reasonable, what is not reasonable with the noise being made. For example, mowing a person's lawn at 10 a.m. is reasonable. Mowing it at 10 p.m. is probably not reasonable, and we can judge that just based on the reasonable people that we are and saying that this makes sense or that doesn't. If you're hearing music from a party inside your home where the doors and windows are shut, and you're watching television and you can hear this, that's an unreasonable noise. So it's very, very, very easy from us to show that those kinds of complaints are problematic. But it's important to know that it has been tested in court, and we have been successful with that. In looking at the number of calls, we looked at a 6-month period for the police department, and we had 253 calls for service in a 6-month period. It's also important to understand that during that same 6-month period, the police department responded to about 33,000 calls for service. So this represents 0.7% of our total call volume in that 6 months. Not a significant number in the grand scheme of things. And out of that 253 calls for service, only 11 times did we have to actually enforce the law and cite somebody. So there again, that's 4% of that 0.7% call volumes. Looking at some of the other enforcement tools that we have, city ordinance, city code. We have construction activities. Currently, they're limited to times of the day within certain proximities to residential areas. So you can't start before 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. depending on the time of the year, and if you're within this proximity to home. Very nice, very clean ordinance, pretty easy to prove that if you can hear it from this area, then you're in violation of that ordinance. Again, not a lot of need for enforcing those, because a lot of times once they're contacted by someone from the city, compliance is gained, and that's really what we want to do with whether it's a statute, an ordinance, or whatever we're doing. We want to gain the compliance from them, and a lot of times it's just an educational issue. Looking at trash hauling activities, we had some complaints on this issue where we have that commercial residential interface where we're now looking at the proximity of the trash receptacles to residential areas. Can we put them on a different part of that property away from those residential areas, and look at times of day? We do have ordinance right now that talks about you can't deliver or pick up trash after 10 p.m. And those have been very successful. Again, we've been able to, through the Goodyear Action Team, to contact these trash haulers and help educate them, as well as kind of be that advocate for the citizen that's getting these noise complaints. One of the difficulties with noise complaints is oftentimes they're a lower priority call, and so sometimes they'll have to wait for other higher priority calls to get completed or until an officer is available. The problem with that is now the citizen or the complainant is discouraged because there's an appearance of being not responsive to them, and that's of concern to us. And in looking at that, creating an ordinance isn't going to make that a higher priority call. You know, we still have to have those calls, and they still are probably going to always be that priority 3, 2 to 3, versus a priority 1, which is a more urgent type of call. We have had some, as a Goodyear Action Team, some very good success with that commercial retail interface, where we had a business on McDowell Road called Buffalo Wild Wings, where we were getting noise complaints, where they would open the north end doors of their building and play live music, and just very loud. It would carry right across the street into the residential areas. Through the Goodyear Action Team, largely community services, we're able to kind of do a mediation with the business and the residents. The business ended up giving $25 gift cards to several of the residents in the area as kind of a peace offering, and quite honestly, since then, through the educational process and the commitment from the city, we've been able to kind of quell that, and I'm not aware of any calls that we've had for noise since that time. There's also development agreements, looking at what was done and the restrictions of nighttime deliveries with Walmart, being that it was right next to a residential area. We're very cognizant of that. And talking with Harvey Krause and members of the community development team, which also participate in the Goodyear Action Team, looking at those times of days for deliveries, parking of trucks at night, idling, those kinds of things, making sure that through the development agreement at the onset that they are aware of what is going to be allowed and what isn't going to be allowed. We also look at this with grocery stores, where there's constant deliveries or perishable items where they have to come in on a daily basis, and making sure that if you're close to a residential area, you need to be careful about when you deliver. Because we have those types of things coming, and they're going to come a lot more frequently. What happens is, and then we have a business along I-10, for example, the Mervyn's in that Goodyear Center Point, whereas if someone was picking trash up at 2 a.m., it probably wouldn't bother anybody, because there is no adjacent residential, and you've got the freeway noise that would probably drown out much of that. So looking at those kind of areas, developing a one-size-fits-all ordinance really isn't going to do us any good. We really need to be specific because it's a fairness issue, and we need to make sure that we involve all of the stakeholders. And looking at some of the other issues that we need to consider with these ordinances, and that is parking lot cleaners. You know, is it reasonable for them to conduct their business at night when there's fewer cars in the parking lot? Absolutely. But if you are directly adjacent to a residential area, that might be problematic because those are very noisy operations. So we need to, again, through more research, looking at what other communities have, find out what they have, but look at those core things and what is really kind of eating our lunch as far as the volume of calls, and it really is not there. We're not seeing the high volumes of these kinds of calls. For example, code enforcement had 129 calls in a year for a myriad of different things. A lot of those are barking dog calls that made up their call volumes. Not really that area, but we're anticipating that we're going to get more, and we need to be ready for that. But at this point, the Goodyear Action Team recommends that we don't implement an ordinance because we have a lot of the enforcement tools out there. But again, the problem is, and even if there was an ordinance, our ability to respond immediately to some of those calls is almost impossible, because code enforcement at night relies on the PD to help out with those things, as well as the trash hauling, that we can at least verify that some of these activities are going on. Quite honestly, more often than not, that activity will be over by the time an officer gets there and can either confirm or deny that that's going on. So it is problematic for us, and it is problematic for our citizens who have to live next to these areas that have this noise. So one thing we need to do is involve our stakeholders, certainly the developers, certainly our economic development department, our community development department, code enforcement, PD, public works. Everybody's a stakeholder in this, and we need to make sure that we have an ordinance that, for one, is defensible, enforceable, and really makes sense and is reasonable to everybody. Any questions? Sir.
How do you enforce noises coming from a stereo type from an automobile?
From an automobile? From an automobile that's moving?
Yes.
You know, the boom, boom.
And those are difficult. And Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Sousa, those are some of the more difficult ones to deal with. Under the state law, you have to say it makes an unreasonable noise. Can we assume that if you can hear that in a place where you have an expectation of privacy, for example, in your home, hear that it's unreasonable? You have to show that it is, but you also have to show, we have to talk about it from the reasonable standpoint. What's the duration of that noise? Is it 1.5 or 2 seconds? Is it a constant thing where someone's parked a vehicle near you? Those are some of the enforcement issues that we have to be able to answer from the reasonableness standpoint. So it's important to do that. But you could easily do that to show that it's doing that if this is a repetitive thing from a certain person. But again, you're going to have witness officers to that and those kinds of things too to verify that.
Difficult one to enforce.
It is very difficult when they're mobile. Sure it is. Because again, you have areas where if they're not near a residential area, who are they disturbing? Who is being a victim of that unreasonable noise?
I don't want to hear their music. I hear it.
Understood. Yeah. No, I completely concur with you on that.
Well, I think it's sort of disturbing 99 amp marking
what I was
dogs.
gonna ask.
And do we need to, I don't know how much this would help, but maybe do something in the In Focus, a little article saying, to be more cognizant of your dog and how it barks and how often it barks, because I'm assuming people go to work, leave the dog in the house, and the dog is yapping.
Or outside.
Or outside. I just think that's really disturbing. That I wouldn't want to be living next door to
I wouldn't
somebody had a
either.
barking dog.
75% of the code enforcement violations were dog or animal barks.
Right.
I mean, 99 of them.
Well,
What do we do to reduce that?
Yeah.
Well, what we're doing is we've created this barking dog packet where we can get neighbors that can sign this saying that I'm disturbed by this noise as well, and taking it for prosecution. We've only had to prosecute, where's Connie? 2? 2 cases out of all of those.
Do you
where
think
we've
that's
gained
because the
compliance.
neighbor doesn't want to turn them in because they got to live next door to that neighbor, and they don't want the bad feelings?
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Lord, I think by the time they call us, they're probably frustrated enough to where they're going to help. So it has been reasonably successful again with us. Not 100% of the time, because some people want us to take care of the problem and be the victim for them. We can't always do that, and therein lies part of the problem too. You know, it does require someone to going to court and saying, I'm disturbed by this. So, yeah, there may be some reluctance, but I think if you only have 2 enforcements that had to take place in that many calls, that's a pretty good testament to me that that's effective. Now, of those 99 calls, some of those may be repeat calls, and probably a quarter to a third of them are
Do
repeat
you
calls.
do anything special for a repeat call? I
Well-
mean, is there, I mean, the same location, you go back out and they
Right.
violated it again, so what happens to the violator?
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Lord, well, that would tend to show, again, that unreasonableness in court, because we have to prove that standard. If you've got multiple calls going to that place, we can show the call histories, and that could certainly be used as evidence against them that a problem is going on.
Do you give them any, the actual owner of the animal, any kind of pamphlet of dog collars, barking collars, or training, or whatever? I mean, is there any kind of information out there that you can proactively give these neighbors that have the animal?
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Osborne, there is some stuff available. Right now, I don't think we're giving them really anything on that. Ours is, again, to gain compliance and to bring their attention to the problem of their barking dog. But, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of information. But if there's repeat customers that we've made contact with already, if we go back, my opinion is they should be cited right then. I mean, we've done the educational part of that, and they've chosen not to comply with us or take action on their own. So we look at it merely from an enforcement and compliance standpoint right now. But we do need an education component in there.
Well,
No doubt
yeah,
about
you
it.
just, your education is giving them a warning that their dog's being noisy and complaining, or people are complaining about it.
Right, but
correct?
also giving them information of maybe some options that
That's
they
what I'm
have
saying. Yes.
to do that. Certainly, we need to be doing that as well.
I think we have to ask the dog owners to be more responsible for their pets. The complaints I get along Palm Valley Boulevard, we have dispensers for doggy bags. And there are signs above the dispensers showing that this is a violation to leave your doggy do without picking it up. There's a fine involved in it. Doesn't seem to faze people at all. I mean, they don't take a bag when they walk their dogs, but the dirt is throughout the neighborhood. And I don't know how you get dog owners to be responsible.
Maybe we just have to do some articles in the InFocus, be a good neighbor,
Yeah.
and list some of these things. I don't know how much good it will do, but at least it shows we're making an effort.
We put in a monthly article in InFocus under code
Which I haven't
compliance.
noticed of.
And so what we'll do is that this next article, we will put in something about dogs and the options and be a good neighbor.
Okay,
That's good.
thank you.
It's not that this council is picking on dog owners. I mean, I think facts speak for itself. I mean, we spend a tremendous amount of money on a dog park that is really being utilized by individuals throughout the city to utilize this facility. But I think it's time for us to remind these folks that they have a responsibility too, to their neighbors as well as the community as a whole. And it's not that we're picking on them, it's just that we want them to become a respectable part of the community. And to
Absolutely.
We have an issue on construction sites. So, in a lot of these areas, in the residential areas, there have been some complaints at homeowner associations where construction crews are leaving trash around. They're dropping, especially nails, things on sidewalks and things that are dangerous. And children are playing in that area. What can we do to tighten that up? Construction and the debris that falls off those construction vehicles as they pull out of their sites and down the road. It seems to me that they are not taking care to secure all of their area before they leave, whether it be the truck or whether it's just the area around their construction site. I mean, it's just loaded with nails, and some of the neighbors have really complained about that. It's been a real problem.
Mayor Kavanaugh, Councilmember Cavalier, we can certainly look into that issue of the cleanliness of, or their, the orderly leaving of their construction sites, and again attempt to encourage them on that.
Yeah, and as I say, it's not a big thing, but it was big enough that it came to a homeowners meeting twice, and it was there was some concern, especially in an area that's fast growing and a lot of new construction.
I know there are a lot of flat tires out there.
Yeah,
too, that
there
get the
is.
nails, so, sure.
I think Raul was going to make a comment.
Yeah, do our inspectors ever?
Mayor, council members, all our contractors are required to clean up after a day's worth of work, and we typically have 1 or 2 inspectors who go around the city pretty quickly and try to ensure that our streets are clean. But if an area is a problem, we could certainly address that.
And we just turn that in, or tell them where to go to code compliance, or what should they do?
Engineering actually takes care of all construction sites.
I'm sorry?
So engineering would take care of the
Engineering?
construction
Oh, okay,
sites.
so have them.
So they would go directly to me.
Okay, I will do that.
Okay.
It seems to be
Good.
certain developers too, so that kind of helps you keep an eye on those particular developers in that particular community, because we too run into that in the community that I'm living in, so. Yeah, so.
Okay.
Further comments? I wonder, Mark, there's a lot of interest on this council on these dog noises.
Sure.
Can we set up some method to measure our level of success over a year or two? It's right now it's 2 per week, and it makes up, like I said, 75%. If we can cut this one down by half, we're making a significant improvement. And one way to do that, I think, is to measure our improvement and make people accountable for doing something about it, whether it's education or enforcement or whatever. But we need to make sure that we're on top of this one.
Absolutely, and it's probably a combination of everything.
Yeah.
So,
But if we could measure our progress, that would be
Absolutely.
good. And report back to council periodically. Okay. Connie has something here.
I just wanted to add that what we'll do is we'll track both new calls and repeat calls and see if we can bring down the number of repeat calls so that we know our education campaign is working.
That's good.
Great.
All you have to do is look at Linda Diller's report to us.
Absolutely. But that doesn't identify if it's a repeat call all the time. So, and I think if we can track that, that will show us whether or not our education campaign is being successful,
But it
and then
surely
lower
gives-
the other numbers.
But it surely gives us an idea of how many calls are being called, how many
Absolutely.
people are calling in about these complaints. They're significant.
Yes, sir.
We good?
sir.
Mayor Kavanaugh, there is someone in the audience that would like to speak.
Yes.
Joseph D'Amico.
Yes, sir.
Come to talk about what Councilman Sousa just brought up about car stereos, how loud they are.
Can you give us your name and address, please?
Joseph D'Amico, I'm at 1634 North, 136th Lane, Goodyear, Arizona. I'm that little thing that sticks into Avondale. But, yeah, this has been, in our area, has been a very bad problem. Palm Valley Boulevard, as you have mentioned, and the 136th Lane that goes into the West Valley Hospital. People are sitting out there just banging away on our homes with those over amplified stereos. Plus, they drive through my neighborhood too. But they sit in the parking lot of the hospital. They sit in the parking lot of Applebee's, and it's getting to the point where you can't go to church because you can't hear the sermon because somebody's out there thumping away. Can't go to the restaurant with your wife and celebrate anniversaries because somebody's out in the parking lot thumping away. And same thing with, schools and, other things. It's just getting to be an invasion of privacy, and I'm not getting any peace and tranquility. And it's and I'm the block watch captain, so I get all the calls from them, and then I have to call the police department and tell them about it too. It's just, it comes to the point where they tell me hey, go take a picture of it and bring it to us, we'll talk to them. And I'm going, well, that's chase them down the street? I mean, that's a bit much, but we have had a few problems with that. I have looked it up, and there are a few things we can do to prevent this, and one is, and probably the most expensive, is the sound camera, which is like a red light camera, but is much more accurate, and you can dial it in for any sound that you want to go after, such as mufflers or motorcycles or, the Jake brake off a 18-wheeler or the over-amplified stereos. This is a real-time picture. It can take you it has 4 cameras. It takes either a clear picture or it can go IR because your windows are dark and your license plate's got a lot of paint or mud on the back, and it can get a clear picture. You can either that, or you can educate the person to put the insulation in their car so that it doesn't go anywhere but in their car. Or you can start doing other things like other cities have done, is confiscate the car, suspend the license. If there's a third issue, then it's a permanent suspension and you auction off the car and keep the money for the city. There's another thing that the Arizona County has, is that the judge can tack on a fine that he sees fit to fund noise abatement programs. Some of those things could be adopted. I'm not sure, how you're going to go about it, but I need to, bring this to you. But there's a criminal element that goes along with this. The criminal element in some cities, when they start confiscating the automobiles, gang activity and drug activity went down by 50%. Now, I'm not saying we have a problem that's that bad, but I'm just saying, it's in that range, and it does have a criminal element. Are there any questions?
No, but I think we could ask the city manager and the staff if you could aggregate these options that were just presented to us and report back to us as to what possible actions we could take, if any.
I have those in Linda Dillard's file.
Okay.
There's about 120 pages in there that I've collected and brought to her, including court cases and the disposition of those court cases.
And we'll send you a copy of the report, too.
Okay.
Yeah, Mayor, I'd like to thank Mr. DeMeco for coming back. He was here last week, was going to speak before us, and we were unaware of that. And so he sat through that whole meeting and then didn't have the opportunity. We thank you for being patient coming back.
Thank you. Luckily, I love baseball, so it was not that bad a problem. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Council.
Okay, we'll meet at 6 o'clock for our regular meeting. Please adjourn.